Hey. So my Cinema 4D and Octane texturing tutorials have been going very well, so I thought I'd bring you another one. This is my Juice commercial concept project. We're going to go through our texturing of a can and our glass, and then we're going to go through multi-passes and render passes and compositing in After Effects. So the texturing part should be quite quick, and then I added an extra bit to do with compositing, so you guys can get some extra value in terms of that. So we're going to start off very quickly with our can. Animation and modeling we're not going to go through because that just takes a long time to do, and you'll end up with a 2-hour tutorial if I do that, and most people just want to know the texturing part. So the texturing is very simple. We'll isolate the top of the lid and we'll start off with that. So here we have our lid, and for the lighting is quite important. So I'm using an HDRI that's from Octane's demo studio pack. So all the HDRIs in this project are from there. And then I have a visible HDRI, which just helps with my compositing for my refractions. And it helps have a nice orange seam and not a white one, which just helps with compositing later on. So yeah, we're going to create a metal texture. To do that, I'm just going to create a glossy material. We'll call this metal, and then we're going to use polygon textures. Polygon.com is where I get all my textures from. We're going to use a metal aluminium one. This is probably one of the most used textures I use, this metal aluminium texture. Plug those two in, and then we're going to go and apply this to our lid like that, and then we're going to make these cubic. You'll notice that it doesn't look metally. To do that, you just turn up your index to 5 or 7, and now you're starting to see this really metal look. It still looks very off though, and this HDRI is very low resolution. That's why the reflections look awful. But once we plug in these textures, it looks fine in the end anyways. So, boom. So the reason why I changed the roughness to float is because if your textures are black and white, changing it to float will tell Octane to only read your textures in black and white, which will save you VRAM and all that extra stuff. And I should turn off my render passes quickly so it's not rendering unnecessary stuff. I'm rendering with one GTX 770 and it's recording the screen, rendering the viewport and the live viewer. So if it's slow and it crashes, that's why. I'm struggling here, guys, but I still want to bring you guys a lot of value, so I'm making these things anyways. So we've got our metal texture down. Now to add a bit of realism, we're going to add in some scratches. I do that by adding in a bump map, like so. This bump map texture which I use, I actually just Googled scratches and then I found this and I downloaded it, and I've been using it ever since. I use it on a lot of my materials actually. It just works really well. So here we have our bumps. Ooh, now it's starting to get a bit slow. But you'll see that it's way too intense, so we can just turn on the power by a lot. It's very slight. And the bumps are actually the wrong way around. It's bumping outwards instead of inwards. We want it to look like a scratch, not like an indent. So we're going to go and invert it. Now it looks like the scratches are coming from the outside and not from the inside. It's still quite harsh though, so we're going to go 0.002, 0.005. That looks a bit better. Maybe scale it up a bit. Scale it down like so, and now I think it's all right. It's okay. It's still a bit too much, but it's fine. We're gonna add some fingerprints. There's one way of doing it where you make it look like it's greasy and you put your fingerprint texture in the roughness. The other way of doing it is you make it look like there's some dirt on it, but to do that is you add a mixed material, you add a diffuse layer. We're gonna call the diffuse overlay, and then we're going to put the metal at the bottom, the overlay at the top, and then you go and get your fingerprint texture. In this case I'm going to use this one, Now you'll see that it's very hard to see, so I'm going to make the texture red, and you also want to apply your actual mixed material. I always forget to do this. So make sure that you're applied your mixed material, but you still can't see it. So we've made it red, and then we're going to crank up the power to 25%. Now you can see it more clearly, but the scale is wrong. I think it's too big, so we're just going to scale it down. Now you can actually see your fingerprints, and you can scale it to the right size. You can rotate it like this, or you can just move the actual positions that way. So it all depends on what you want it to look like. But once you've gotten your scaling and your positioning and all that stuff right, then you can start adjusting it to the way you want it to actually look. So if you want it to look like a brown dirt mark, you could do that, and then you can just turn this power down. So now it looks like some guy came with muddy fingers and put their fingerprints on there. But yeah, so that's the lid. Now we can just isolate this can quickly and save it. I save it a lot because my PC tends to crash. So we've done the lid, and I've isolated the can, the bottom of the can, so that it copies this material, and that's fine. For the droplets, it's just a basic Octane specular material called droplets. And then all I did was just apply it like that. And then to solve any compositing issues I might have, I'll also go and take fake shadows and effect alpha. And now our droplets are there, but the actual can texture is not there, so it's hard to see right now. But now we're going to do the graphic part. The graphic part was done in Photoshop. That's where I got that texture from. I made it in Photoshop base. So you just want to take your texture, whatever size it is. It all depends on the size of your can and stuff. So you just want to find your graphic image like that. And then I need to find this thing, 2017 commercial concept graphic, that. And then all I did with this is I made the projection cylindrical, and then I adjusted the coordinates and rotation and stuff until it fit the way I wanted it to fit. And in the end, it took a while though, but in the end it worked out fine. It's still a bit off, but it's fine. To make this look a bit more metally, we're going to go and turn up the index. We can call this graphic, just for organization. We'll turn up the index until we see our reflections. And then we will add another bump texture. We can probably just copy the one from the metal and then adjust it. Like so, make it a bit more harsh. I can see there's some tiling going down there, so I'm just going to turn up the size a bit. And turn up the power. Now we're starting to see, but there's still some tiling going on, so we need to make this size even larger. And now we're sort of getting the right size for our scratches in terms of scale. It might be too much, so I can turn this down to 0.2 or 0.15. And now we're just getting subtle scratches, but we don't want it to be too much. In this case, for my fingerprints, I'm going to go and pump it in the roughness channel. My throat's getting sore from talking. I'm going to put this in the roughness channel, and I'm just going to drink some water. Oh, this is more difficult than it seems. Okay, so we put it in the roughness channel. It's very hard to see though. Let me see what's going on. Oh, now you can see our fingerprints. I don't know if you can see it in the recording, but there's slight fingerprint marks there, but that's a bit too harsh. We want it to be very, very subtle. So our fingerprints are now showing up there. And if you want to go the extra mile, you can even add a metal texture in the specular, which will just make slight differences. Not anything that noticeable really. Like so. And there we have our can. as you can see over here. Just let this thing update like so. Here we have our cans. If you want to know how to do the drops, there's a Cinema 4D tutorial on YouTube on how to make those drops, and that's how I learned how to do it. So there you can see the fingerprint marker. But if you spend more time on this, it'll come out looking really nice. Your fingerprints and all that stuff will really show, and then you'll get the realism. There's way too many drops on these cans, but that's irrelevant right now. So now we'll do the floor, since it's very simple. The next two textures are very easy to do. We'll do the floor, but it's floor. And this, I just wanted it to match the background as much as possible, so that we get that seamless look when you're doing our compositing. So you can literally just go and do that. Let's just, I didn't apply it to the floor yet. There we go. And then I just made it slightly brighter until it actually matched the visuals. But yeah, so you get the point. You just want the floor and the background to match as close as possible. The glass, we create a specular material. We will make this index 1.52. You can go ahead and apply it to your glass, like so. Now if I go and make the background alpha, you'll see that the glass is still orange. To fix that, we're going to go into common, effect alpha. Now the glass also has some transparency, and if we're also going to take fake shadows just so that light doesn't act funny and actually goes through the glass and stuff, so you can get some nice looking results. But once everything is done, once you're happy with everything, my render settings, I went path tracing. I almost always go path tracing. 512 samples, and the rest is pretty basic. And I went for 1920 by 804 output and PNG 16-bit with an alpha channel. And then for my render passes, I went EXR format. I always go EXR format because it's easy to composite in After Effects that way. And zip compression 16-bit, and then I'll show you, you'll see here I ticked a bunch of stuff and I'll show you why. Firstly, my object IDs, these don't show up in the live viewer, but I basically added a Octane object tag to every single object, and then I gave it a certain layer ID, and then I ticked them accordingly in the render passes, and that way I can isolate certain objects in the final render. And when I'm compositing, I can isolate certain objects, and then I can like mask out the floor, mask out the background, or do whatever I want to. I don't have to re-render the whole scene to do that. For my other render passes, I had a shadow pass. I just did that to sort of amplify the shadows a bit, because I felt that the shadows in the final render were a bit weak, and then that made the whole scene darker. So to combat that, I also had a reflection and refraction pass, which I rendered out, and I sort of just brightened those up a bit in the post. But I'll be showing you all that inside of After Effects now. My position pass I used for my depth of field, which never actually made it in the final render, so you don't need that. And then I had a material ID pass. This is just to isolate certain objects in the scene in case I want to change the saturation, the colors, or the brightness, for example. And the object layer color, I use this to mask out the floor. And the render layer mask, I use this to mask out the background. But some of these are a bit unnecessary, but it's nice to have in the end. You don't have to render out the whole thing again. And you'll notice that I don't actually have my liquid. I should have mentioned this at the start. I don't have my liquid. That's because I deleted my RealFlow cache. It was taking up a lot of space. So we're not going to go into any RealFlow texturing, any liquid texturing and this one. And I can do liquid texturing and liquid simulations and stuff in another tutorial. And I'm actually doing a fire tutorial. I'm preparing that right now as well, fire simulations. But So yeah, that's the project done. You just want to render out your sequence. I would recommend rendering out 3 images and with the multipass and stuff enabled, and then you can sort of test it that way. And then once you feel like you've got the hang of it, you can render out the whole thing. Otherwise, you're going to sit there for a whole day and figure out that's not what you wanted. So to get this final look, we're going to pretend that I've just rendered out the whole thing, and we have our EXR and our animatic, our EXR and our normal PNG sequence here. I'm going to delete all the effects. And then I'll just make sure everything is set back to normal. So here we have our EXR and our PNG. You can see it looks quite bad right now, but we're going to make this look nice and fancy. Firstly, there's a seam in the background. If you don't want the seam there, this is the way I did things. You can do it however you want to do it, but I took my EXR. You go 3D. You go right click in the effects 3D channel extractor. This is how we get our render passes out. They're all inside of one layer, which is perfect. We're going to go and, how did I do this? We're going to go and mask 1 for the cans. And we're going to duplicate it, mask 2 for the bottle. And we're going to duplicate it, mask 3 for the liquid. Where's mask 3? There's mask 3. Okay, for the liquid. And let's just put it somewhere here so everything's on the screen. And then we will make this screen, and then we're going to pre-compose this and call this mask. Now why we did that is because we're going to go and, what did we do? We're going to go, how can we do this? We can add on a new layer, you can add something like a square, and then you can make it whatever color you want it to be. Let's just choose that one. And then you can add a fast blur, like so. And then we're going to duplicate this PNG sequence. We're going to place this on top of everything. And we're going to place our mask on top of that. And then we're going to go and Luma matte. Now you'll see that the seam's gone. And the reason why the seam's gone now is because I'll show you how all the layers go together. So we have our mask layer, which basically masks out anything that's not in the scene. We mask out the background and the floor basically in this mask. And I've set it so that this layer has a Luma matte to the mask. So all that's showing is this. And then the original PNG is basically just the background and the floor. And then in between that, we have a gradient. So it goes like the original layer, the gradient, and then the object's mask on top of that, like so. And that's how I got rid of the gradient. You can use whatever, how I got rid of the seam, you can use whatever method that you want. And then the rest of the XRs are just for beauty purposes. The way I did this was, I went shadow pass, change this to multiply, and then you can reduce the opacity, but now you see your seams back. To fix your seam on your shadow pass, you can, let's just change this back to normal. Pre-compose this layer, and we can call this shadow pass. To fix our seam, the way I did it is I duplicated this, and then I went and selected render layer mask, and then I used a Luma matte again. Then I created a gray solid background, the back, and then you want to sort of match these colors as close as possible. So, and then to get rid of that seam, I cheated and went inner glow, and I just picked a color like that, 100% normal, and then 1, and then the choke can be 100%. So that's how I did that section there. Just make sure this color is correct. And then you sort of want to spend time to get this background to look as close as possible. But yeah, that seam is still there. Why is that? This has worked every single time before. Let me see. 2. Nope. That's weird. But I guess it's not that big of a deal. I used a different method originally, but I forgot how I did it. So I just used a layer styles this time, but it's not gonna be that noticeable. So we're just gonna change this to multiply and then 25%. Now you'll see we have our shadows are more emphasized, but our scene's gone darker. So we're gonna pop in our XR again, but here we're going to go reflection. Let me just make sure everything's fine. And then we're going to duplicate. We're going to go refraction. And let's just get rid of these luma mats. Delete that. And then we're going to change this to screen and change that to screen as well. So now we have these 2 layers that just brighten up the scene a bit. And then we're going to go and add a adjustment layer. We can call this CC. And we're going to go looks. You don't need to have this magic bullet looks plugin. You can do it in normal After Effects effects, but I just like to have them all in one place. So we're going to use our color ranges. We're going to darken this a bit, maybe brighten that up. It's too bright though. And then, let's just reset that. And then we can add, what do we want to add? Oh, excuse me. You can add a vignette if you want. Let's just adjust this, and you can, what else is there to play with? You can add a S curve, maybe reduce that contrast a bit. And you can add some diffusion, like so. And then we have our color correction, and then all that's left really is the motion blur. I'm going to go very simple this time, and I'm just going to use the standard one, and we're going to copy that and then paste it there. And now we have our motion blur as well. Like so. So that's basically how I did this juice commercial project, really. In case of modeling, I can quickly show you what all the objects look like when they're not subdivided. Basic cylinder that I just put in a subdivision. That's very simple to do. The can itself, that's what the base mesh looks like. The base mesh looks like over there, and I subdivided that. And then the lid, can just get rid of these. That's what this lid part was a bit more complicated, but it's still fairly simple to do. It just takes a while to get right. So that's how I did my models for the project. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed. I really thank you guys for your support in my tutorials, and I'm keen to make more, so I'd like to do that. Next will probably be a fire simulation tutorial. Those simulations are quite hard to do when I have such a small graphics card to do all these things at the same time. And that's why I've hesitated doing RealFlow simulations, because RealFlow is tough enough as it is. And for me to record a bunch of stuff and try to simulate things in RealFlow, that's just a pain. But yeah, thank you guys for your support. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you want me to do any specific types of tutorials, you can always just let me know and I will consider it. So have a good day and goodbye.